So, good evening, everyone. Um, Yesterday we were talking about Genesis chapter 3, and I see it a little clearer today. In fact, I'm a little excited about what I see here today. Uh, I was wrong about something, though. There is a subtle difference between what Eve does here and what was done with the other women in Genesis that we looked at it, and we're gonna look at that firsthand and see that subtle difference makes a huge difference. Okay, uh, I'm gonna read this and I'm gonna go back and we're gonna talk about Abraham and we're gonna talk about Isaac and some of those in a minute, making a comparison and seeing what took place here. Okay, and so I won't. I'll do it. We normally do. I'll ask if there are any questions, but I'm going to pretty much. I'm going to try to be brief, but I'm going to kind of start over. Okay, if you don't mind. So I will give you room for questions, because that's normally how we start, and you may have other questions outside of this lesson. So let's take a moment and start there and see if there are any questions. Okay. Well, I'll get started then, and if you do have questions at any time, please feel free. I'm in chapter 3, and I see something in chapter 2 I'm going to look at as well. So, and if it sounds like I go a little fast, I get a little fast and I get excited. So just slow me down or ask me to repeat something. Verse 1, chapter 3 of Genesis. Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field which the Lord God had made. And he said to the woman, indeed, has God said, you should not eat from any tree of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, from the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat, but from the fruit of the tree which is in the middle of the garden, God has said, you should not eat from it or touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, you surely shall not die. For God knows that in the day that you eat from it, your eyes will be open and you will be like God, knowing good and evil. And when the woman saw, I'm going to stop right there. Look at this for a moment and see what took place. The first thing look at this is to say, what is the sin? If eating the fruit was the sin, and when evilness comes in, what brings about the evilness? What brought about the serpent in the first place? See, nobody ever talks about that part of it. If the eating of the fruit, tasting the fruit, was what we call the fall or the sin, then where does the serpent come from? Okay? It all lies here in taking a closer look at the Adam. Now, I'm going to, if when it's necessary, I'll say Eve or Adam, but I'll say him or her rather. But the whole entity is the Adam. So even with the conversation that I just read, that's the Adam. And you say, well, he was talking to Eve. Remember yesterday I asked you what made him talk to Eve? Where is Adam? Why is he talking to Adam? Well, go back to our previous lessons. Go back to our lessons in Genesis and what we looked at, what we saw, and even when we looked at the lepers, in the wholeness of who you are, when you are a human, when you recognize your totality, your feminine and your masculine attributes. That's what makes up the character of define the characteristics of you being the human. Okay, so this thing talks to the spiritual side of the man. It talks to the feminine side of him. That's okay so far. But the deception is
Ron, this is Vermel. I'd like to ask a question. Am
Okay.
I understanding when you're talking? What I think you're saying is that, and I want to understand this, that Eve, Adam, and the serpent are all embodied in each of us? Is that who's talking?
Yeah, yes. This is an internal conversation. Yes, and you're headed right where I'm going. I want to. We're going to take a closer look at the serpent because the serpent was. How do I say this? The serpent was created.
Okay.
All right. The serpent was your created thoughts.
Oh.
Now, how does that take place? Watch this. Watch what takes place here. What did we see when we looked at Abraham? We saw something when we looked at Abraham. We looked at the oneness that he and Sarah were, right? We looked at and we talked about some other publications that talked about how he conversed with Sarah when they decided which directions to go in, when he took his caravan in different directions. Sarah was a very active part of his daily life. She wasn't just his wife who sat in a tent. So when her time came and she transitioned, a very spiritual essence was passed on to her son, to Isaac and Rebecca. Remember when they entered into her tent? So that feminine essence, that glory was passed on to them, and they both accepted it, and they both coupled and became one. Okay, so when you look at those two, and even if you want to go ahead and look at Jacob and Leah, Jacob and Rachel, all of those are some of the same examples. What is the physical example of them having balance? Whether it's Abraham or Sarah, whether it's Isaac and Rebecca, whether it's Jacob, what is the physical example of them having balance? The offspring. The offspring. They moved as one. They moved as one, and they moved spiritually. They moved as a human. I'm going to show you something. This thing says, and the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field. What died here? If God said that if you do this, you will surely die. What died? The humanity died. They became animals. Because they were not coupled, because they were not walking as one, they became animals. If you go back and look at verse 25 in chapter 2, it says, and the man and his wife were both naked and they were not ashamed. And we talked about this before. And then you go down to the next verse in chapter 3, the first verse. Now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field. Those two words come from the same root. Naked and were not afraid. Naked and crafty come from the same root. The serpent was created. When you look at serpent,
hey Ron,
it talks. Yes, sir.
Will you back up and explain what you mean when you said they became animals?
Okay. What I'm saying is, what I wanted to show is the serpent was created from his mind, and it was created from the animalistic. When he tells the man, when he says to Adam, verse 19 in chapter 2, and I know I'm kind of skipping around, guys. I'm kind of talking this out of my head. And out of the ground the Lord God formed every beast of the field and every bird of the sky. and brought them to the man to see what the man would call them, and whatever the man called that living creature, that's what his name. That's what it named, was its name. And the man gave names to all cattle and to all birds of the field and to every beast of the field. So what is that saying? That's saying that the character of each one of these animals was set by man. So when you look at the serpent, what it talks about is, it talks about to practice divination, which is talking about implied power to learn secret things. It's talking about to learn by foretelling something, to foresee something, to predict something, to even see prophecy, to learn by omens. And omens, again, is being able to see things that appear from a god. So what he sees here, he thinks, or he thinks that it is acceptable because it is a spiritual thing, but it's something that he created. This is something that he contemplated himself and he created. So he looks at this thing and says the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field. This came to him. It was something that he recognized because it was something that he named. It was something that he was familiar with. So when he does this, it sounds like the right thing. It sounds like he's doing the right thing. It appears to him like he's doing the right thing. It looks like pleasure to him because it reminds him of his walk with God, but it is not his walk with God. How do you know when you're out of balance? Go back to Abraham. Go back to Isaac. Go back to all of them. What did they do? What was their walk? Nothing they did, nothing those women did was for selfish reasons. There is nothing here that brings about salvation. The only thing God said to him was, he said to him, to verse 15, then the Lord God took the man and put him in the garden to cultivate it and keep it. In other words, what is a garden? We talked about this yesterday. Everything that was created has to do, is a metaphor for man. Every plant, every animal, every tree, every shrubbery. So when we looked at this on yesterday, and Pastor said, we were talking about the man that Jesus heals, and he said, I see men walking the street, and he said, this is talking about the beliefs of man. And so every one of these things is talking about thought. Every one of these things talk about your feelings, your thoughts, the things that you see, your principles, the things you believe in. So what he's saying to him, you are to cultivate this garden. You are to see this. You are to keep it fresh. You are to make sure that it's growing and it is being fruitful. And what is this thing that is being growing and being fruitful? Thoughts. Godly thoughts. Pure thoughts. Thoughts of truth. Thoughts that grow man to the point where he can see himself. Thoughts that bring about balance. And so that was his... this thing that we are calling the fall, what takes place here, has nothing to do whatsoever with anything but his own selfish agenda. He is out of balance.
Right.
Yes, sir.
Would you back up and pull it together up to him?
Okay.
To this point, because I have a question, but I don't want to. I want to get it clear my head first, rather.
Okay. I'm saying that the spiritual side of the Adam is what is talking to the serpent. It appears that the serpent is a spiritual being, but it is not. It is something that has been conjured up that grew in his own mind. He grew this because he knows how to walk with God, and he grew this thing for selfish reasons. It is showing that the masculine energy and the feminine energy are not in balance with each other. This is being done purely for selfish reasons. It is not.
So he cultivated thought.
Ask again, Pastor.
He cultivated the thought.
He cultivated the thought outside of the garden. This has nothing to do with the garden. Yes. This is purely selfishness. Everything that the entire journey of the human has to do with being the go-between, for lack of a better term, between the animalistic nature of man and Elohim and the Creator. That's it. Your whole the whole agenda of the human has to do with man, helping man see redemption, helping man to see loving kindness.
So
when you become human, what his job was, the cultivating and keeping of the garden, had everything to do with being human and standing in the gap for mankind. And he walked away from that.
Okay. So
he lost. Well, he did not walk away. He lost focus of it.
So his selfishness started, or his selfishness is shown when he says, "For this cause shall a man leave a womb, leave his father and mother."
Yes.
That's
where it starts. Yes, sir. So, and as I said, the word naked there again is talking about being crafty, being shifty, being shrewd. That's not just naked. It's not just being bare.
okay.
So when it says, and now the serpent was more crafty than any beast of the field, this is something that the man was quite familiar with. This is something that he creates. Excuse me.
So what's happening is, what we are seeing is that this spiritual entity, Adam, right?
Yes.
Has been placed in a position or have been given the opportunity to determine not only its train of thought, but also to determine to determine the direction that he would travel in terms of his thoughts. He was given that opportunity.
Yes.
So when he was created, or when it was created with selfishness in it. That had to be one of the attributes.
Let me show you how true that is. Let me find something here.
When you say it was created, you saying man was created?
No, the entity Adam is called it because it's not a man. It's both man and woman.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. It's not a physical man, I should have said. It's spiritual.
Okay.
So can I ask this question then as part of this? This is Vermel.
Yeah.
Adam embodied the light and the darkness, and out of the darkness came his thoughts, his crafty thoughts to create the serpent?
What I see in that, tell me if I'm on the right track, is that once he said, "For this cause shall a man separate," everything began to change. Am I right?
Yes.
And
yes.
Now here we are. Vermel is this entity, and Vermel has said, "You know what? I don't want to deal with you anymore. I'm done." So now Vermel goes into this space of her own, and she begins to contemplate what she's going to do next. She realizes she has the ability to create because she has recognized her feminine side, which gives birth to things.
Okay.
In doing so, she also realizes something else. All of the beasts of the field is speaking of thought. So when it talks about the crafted of it all, it's talking about the most devious thoughts is what he focused on, or it focused on. It became the focus. And when those devious thoughts became the focus, then that is when we get to the place where what we call the fall. And that at that point, Elohim begins to speak to the mind or the soul of Adam, of the entity called Adam. And because he is what he found wanting, because he actually began to focus on something that was totally adverse to what he was created to be, it is at that point that a wall or a shield was placed between him and those the thoughts of righteousness, so that he could not be able to use his powers to keep unrightness or evilness in the land. Am I on track?
Yeah, yes, sir. Here's what's interesting.
Wait a minute, Ron.
About,
I want to make sure.
yes, sir.
Jamil, and those of, did you understand that?
I think I do understand. That makes me, when you said a shield, is that where the tree of knowledge was shielded from us so that we would not?
The tree of life.
Tree of life. So that we would not, we would desire to come back and find the truth? Like, that's what I want to say.
That's, well, innate in Adam was that desire to know who it is. And that's been the quest forever.
And that's really the quest inside of each and every one of us, our spiritual being having an earthly experience then. Because we're always looking for something, and it's never what we think it is.
And one of the big issues we have, especially with these scriptures, is that we separate them. We see good and evil, tree of knowledge, good and evil, tree of life over here. Then we see the conversation between the entity and the creator over there. However, the whole thing is talking about the makeup of that entity called Adam. What I'm saying is this: the tree of life, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, is simply the rightness of the wisdom that's there, or the unrightness of it. That is in every one of us. If it were not, then we would not have an opportunity to understand the tree of life. The tree of life is not something that's breathing as we breathe. The tree of life is the understanding of who you are and the purpose for your being. That's the tree of life, at least a portion of it. Am I on the right track?
Yes, sir.
And
yes,
so,
sir.
So the affinity that this entity had, or the desire that this entity had, was to do it its way. And doing it its own way, it had a choice between following the attributes of Elohim or creating its own. And the tree of knowledge of good and evil is where this entity created its own desires, as opposed to following after desires that Elohim placed in him. For example, your child, you put right and wrong in your right in your child. Your child makes a decision: I'm going my own way, instead of going the direction that you have trained him to go. That child gets to a point where he bumps his head against the wall, or he has issues in his life, and everything that you had told him the right thing to do comes back to him, and now he's like the prodigal son. He's coming back. He's walking away from what he thought was here. Now he's finding his way back to the place of righteousness. Are you seeing that?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. You're right on track. In other words, what she's searching for, what it is searching, it being the Adam is searching for, it already had. And the prodigal son is the perfect example. You can't see that you're already there, and you leave and get in trouble, and you look up and say, "Oh my God, where was I? Look at what I did." So that's what happens here. And let me read a verse. I'm sorry, y'all. I'm kind of all over the place, but I'm hopefully pastor kind of straighten out when I say something here, if it don't make sense. Okay. All right. Chapter 1. This verse, verse 20, saying, God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, and over the living things that move on the earth. He's not talking about animals. He's not talking about having babies. He's saying, guard your thoughts. It's another way of saying the same thing that God said to Cain. Guard your thoughts. Be careful here. Take care of your thoughts. Subdue the things that you know are wrong. Subdue the things that are not of me. Do not let these things creep in you and grow. Don't let this take root in you. So I'm putting the human over the garden so that you can guard these things, so that you can show the earth the right way. Make sense, y'all?
Again.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
This is Milligan. So, like for individuals that have a sense of deep hatred or murder, or any of us that have something deep on the negativity of life, that's what we're talking about guarding. Like guarding yourself from believing white supremacy theories or lies or thievery. That's what that scripture is really referring to.
I think it's more subtle than that. I don't think it's even to that extreme. Because I want you to pay attention to something. We hadn't even, go ahead, Pastor. But let me throw this out there, Pastor, and you can clean it up for me and say what you got to say.
Great.
We haven't,
Go ahead.
We haven't even talked about evil. He has not eaten from the tree of life. So what is evil? If he's saying guard your thoughts and make sure and take care of the garden, then is that not evil? The thoughts that can come from this, the thought that is showing here in the conversation with the serpent, is that considered evil?
Yes.
Okay.
Any weed or weed. Well.
Now, this is what I see. I see this conversation being within self, right? And I see that this whole story is about being very careful of your thoughts. Why? Because you create the environment that you live in. As a man thinketh, so is he. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. So whatever you ponder on, that's what you become. Which means that this entity of Adam was created to become a physical Elohim in the earth. When it talks about guarding your thoughts, if all the thought that was put in this entity, if all the thoughts were righteousness, then he wouldn't have to guard his thoughts. Therefore, when Isaiah writes that the Lord says, I created the darkness, I created evil, the light and the evilness, darkness. I created good and evil and light and darkness. When Isaiah writes that, why is it that evilness was created? Why is it that darkness was created? It's found right here, I do believe. Without the ability to stray, you cannot be Elohim. You must have the ability to create. And the ability to create does not mean that you are always going to create or fashion that which is righteous. The idea the example that you raised for male with white supremacy, that is a thought that was created out of selfishness.
Okay.
And that thought has been manifest as you can see it play out. The same place where that white supremacy came in terms of thoughts is the same place where religion came, same place where murder comes. Okay. Anything that's adverse to the principles of the kingdom comes from that same place.
Okay.
So what happens is we end up living a life under the auspices of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In other words, we live in a life where at some point we do the right thing and sometimes we don't. And whether it be telling a lie or lynching someone, both of them are evil because they are unripened. The same propensity for evilness that the one who lynches someone has, you have it also. You just chose to be guided by the right side of the tree, the rightness of that knowledge that you have of your existence.
Okay.
Are you understanding that?
Yes, I'm understanding it. And that choice is what we call free will, right?
That's what we call it, yes.
Okay.
And that free will is not what we think it is.
Okay.
Free will deals with you have the freedom to will what you want to be. That means that when you are contemplating things that are unrighteous, whether it be something selfish or whether it be taking something from someone, then what you are actually doing is willing that to come into existence. You are desiring that to come into existence. And that desire turns into action. And we call the action criminal or evil, wrong, etc. The difficulty is we're thinking about trees and snakes. When we're talking about being devious, when we're talking about being confused, as opposed to being at peace with enlightenment. If we cannot refrain from focusing or living in this space, where good and evil constantly exist, and we are not trying to journey, making every effort to journey to that space or to get to a place where our minds are not leading us, but our soul is. I see the soul as being the center of what we call the tree of life, and the mind being the center of what we call good and evil. As long as we live from our minds, we will constantly be unripened. We cannot live from memory of the past. We must live for the desire of the future. when we live with memory of the past, we get confused and we conflate the wrong things. However, when we live from our souls with desires for the future, then that involves enlightenment for everyone, regardless of who they are, and understanding that we are not enlightened for enlightenment's sake. We are enlightened to enlighten others. Is that clear?
I think it is.
Does that along the lines where you had to run?
Yes, sir. That's it.
So can I continue?
Yeah. Did she understand, Pastor? Did she have a question in the middle before you go further?
Ramel, or anyone else for that matter?
No, I don't have a question yet. I think it's becoming very unfolding clear to me.
This is Barbara. I have a question. When the Adam had the feminine part of him supposedly separated from it, was that the opportunity? Had it not been separated, would the Adam have said, have known and said, "This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh," which is the beginning of my, and the beginning of not possession, but the selfishness of "this is mine" kind of thing. Had the woman had the attribute of the woman not been perceptually separated from Adam, would that have been its thinking? Or was the separation or the perception of the separateness such that Adam could really see the feminine side of itself? Was that the catalyst that speeded up that attitude of selfishness, in a sense, is what I'm trying to get at.
This is what I see in the whole story, that everything there was purposely done. A lot of the embellishment of an allegory makes it difficult to see, even though it's hidden in plain sight. This is what I'm saying. If that entity had not said, "This is my flesh, bone of my bone, and for this cause shall a man leave," if that had not taken place, there would not be an existence of physicality. This was purposely done. Every single thing that regards this entity, the spiritual being, was purposely done. The end game from the beginning was to have a physical experience. That was the end game. Therefore, in order for that to happen, that entity had to possess everything that Elohim possessed, its creator possessed. And having everything that its creator possessed, which are inclusive of light and darkness, good and evil. That being there was necessary. Why? Because the ultimate objective was to bring the physical earth to a place of balance, as is the balance in the spiritual realm. The connection there is seen, or how it's connected rather, is seen when Jesus was resurrected. The connection there is the humility and the peace that is brought into the earth realm grants permission to move through the earth as Jesus did after the resurrection. That in itself is the resurrection of truth. So what I'm saying is, Barbara, in a lot of words, I guess, is that regardless of what, this was going to happen. It was created to happen. The only thing that I see has changed is that this man in the physical form has chosen to continue to live from its mind, good and evil, as opposed to just making the decision to live from its soul. In order for this physical entity to live from its soul in a continuous way, there had to be controversy. The controversy started with the challenge of remaining in one with a wound or walking away from it or removing itself or perceiving itself to be removed from it and doing what it chose to do. After that happened and the physicality took place, there had to be controversy deep enough, divisive enough to become so uncomfortable until that Elohim in physical form would have to be destroy itself, self-destruct, or move to understand who it is and begin to live from its soul. And in living from its soul, that controversy, the controversy that's the deepest in the earth is greed and racism, money and racism. Racism because slavery brought about the money thing. So when this happens, it is no different than the friction that we saw between Cain and Abel, or for that matter, between Esau and Jacob. All that friction is there for a reason. The friction that we are experiencing with Caucasian, with Europeans, is a friction that's inside of us. And that friction that's in us is prolonged by our stubbornness or our anger or our desire to do what we want to do. The Creator has said to us in no uncertain terms, you can go to court, you can go to Congress. You can do anything you want to do to get rid of this friction. Is not going to happen because I created you in such a way that the only way you can remove this friction is to become one with me. And that cannot happen until you begin to search for who you are. And when you see who you are obligated to make sure that your brethren see who they are as well. And that means that you are your brother's keeper. And being your brother's keeper has nothing to do with the color of the skin or the language that you speak. It has everything to do with what started there in that place that we call the garden that we're still in and continues to this day. Think about this. The good and evil, the African, the European, that's what a friction is. That's the duality of the friction, not realizing that they are one. And it will never end until we embrace the nature of our being and see clearly that what we call a European is also an African. And to eliminate that friction, whatever it takes is going to be done. That is one of the reasons that we are beginning to see not the browning of America, but the browning of the world. Because whatever it takes to bring that friction to an end is going to be done. However, all of it is within the purview of this physical entity with an animalistic attitude at this moment, struggling to become human. And you cannot become human based on color, skin color. You can't become human based on whether you're from Africa or whether you're from Europe or whether you are from China. It is not predicated on that, because all of those are false constructs. It is predicated on truly believing that all of us are one. And if we hate anyone, we are hating a part of ourselves. If we love everyone, then we're loving ourselves. Does that make sense to you?
Yes.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
other thing that tells me that skin color is not the primary issue is that, I mean, in countries where the skin color is the same, there's still that friction. And so
Right.
that tells me it's more than just the physical.
It's spiritual friction. And it's going to continue until we deal with it. The depth of it. Think about it. Bobby, you brought in a point. Think about this. There was friction between Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and still is. And all of them are the same color. So it's deeper than that. It's manifested in many ways as skin color, based on skin color, but that's not what it actually is. The thing that we see with our eyes is not the thing that's happening that we see with our eye. The friction is there for the express purpose of this being fully becoming human as it was created to be. Is that clear? Or are there questions I should ask?
I got a couple more things to add. Then you talking.
Okay. No, I'm not finished. I just want you can add. Or somebody has a question, I think, Ron.
Okay.
Does somebody have a question?
I did.
Okay.
What you mean by he fully became human?
I said we are fighting to become human.
Oh, okay.
Our thoughts are animalistic. When we with loving kindness, at the principles of the kingdom, that's when we become human. When we become Elohim, having a physical experience. Help you, Charles?
A little bit.
Okay, we're going to keep talking. If you got another one, raise it, okay?
All right.
Ron?
I also believe that, and Pastor said something similar. I think God, Elohim, also was a part of this, and I'm not saying he made it happen. I'm saying he was a part of setting it up to happen, and he did something to protect it, knowing it's almost like the baby's going to fall, so I'm going to put the pillow down before it falls. Here's what takes place, and if you'll miss it if you're not careful. Look at chapter 2, verse 21. And so the Lord God caused a deep sleep to fall upon the man, and he slept. Then he took one of his ribs. So the man was never awakened. God knew that this was going to happen. The man was never awakened to the consciousness of where he was prior to. So when he sees what is in him, he's not the same mindset. He's in a slumber, if you will, because he's not in a place to recognize the spiritual being that he was prior to recognizing the woman. And that goes back to the question that Barbara asked: what did he recognize?
Nothing.
And I think, okay,
I'll tell you why.
my thoughts. Okay, go ahead. Because all I was gonna say is my thoughts were he saw her as a non-human. He saw her with his eyes instead of his eye, and I think he used her as an instrument rather than as to bring balance. But go ahead, and I'll get it.
He said, for this cause shall a man leave, right? He did it because he saw what he could bring into existence. That was selfish. So that's where the usury comes in. What I'm saying is, right now, in the space that we are in the same space that this spiritual creature was in. The only difference is that physical creature, we are looking at it spiritually now. Let me show you what I see. The whole purpose of all of this spiritual stuff happening and all of these divisions and the separations, all of this happened spiritually, and then the physicality came into existence. In other words, everything that we are experiencing now was created before the entity became physical. Can you see that?
Yeah. Yes.
Every bit is no different than me taking a bottle and sitting it on the side of the table, and I get some black sand and some white sand, and I mix it together, and then I separate it out, and then I put it in separate bottles. And neither one of those bottles is whole without the other. So when I recognize that it is incumbent upon me that I was created to bring about this balance, to become whole, it is at that point where I began to tilt the bottles so both of them can become one, can become whole. What I am saying is this. If there is one European and one African, there will not be balance until that European and that African comes together. The reason that Europeans are upset about being brown is because Europeans are seeing with their eyes and not their eye. And as long as we see as they see, we will be the same way because there's no difference in us. We are seeing with our eyes as long as you see them and treat them the way that you feel they treated you or the anger that you have towards them. You cannot do that. We have to understand that this is not a game that we are playing. And every single day shows us that. If we don't hurry up and get rid of our attitudes about people based on color, we are going to destroy this earth. I am saying that we are destroying the earth with this negative energy that we have towards each other. If the people who are looking for truth are at odds with each other, if the people who are looking for truth can separate themselves from people based on attitude, color, religious belief, whatever, then we will destroy this earth. The oceans will continue to fill up from the melting of the ice. The storms will get worse. The deer will begin to destroy the foliage there in Utah. The ecosystem is dying. And the reason the ecosystem is dying is because we are literally playing games. And we think we are not. We as a whole in this are playing games. Either we are going to believe what we say we believe, walk the way we're supposed to walk, get rid of our attitude, get rid of our phony beliefs, get rid of all this religious dogma, get rid of all of this political desire, and stand on what we know the truth to be, and see people without having to differentiate between them based upon the color of their skin. We have defined racism as being a system that is set up to subjugate people of darker complexion. Spiritual racism exists. Spiritual racism is when you know better, but you won't do better and you won't teach better. You go to that congregation and you say the same things over and over. Yesterday, we talked to some people from California. And what we were doing, and I didn't realize it till now, is making every effort to overcome spiritual racism. Because we as a people have been dominated for too long. And if we continue to allow ourselves to be dominated because of the way we act, the earth will die. I had no idea that I was going to see this evening. The earth is dying because of the African. The Caucasian is not killing the earth. It's the African who's killing the earth, because when you know better, you do better. Does that make sense to you guys?
Yes.
Come on now.
Yes.
I
Yes.
think yes.
When we make every effort to be like the one who had been the oppressor, then we are destroying the earth. However, when we follow the depth of our soul, then we understand that it's not things that makes us happy. We understand that Christmas is about commerce and not about family. When we flip the switch on that and begin to act like that, that's when we begin to see a resurrection of the earth. That's when we begin to see a reversal in the coral reef. We must take charge of our existence before we become non-existent. And I feel that wholeheartedly. I have been restless for weeks, and now I know why. Questions, comments, additions, whatever. I need to hear you.
Can I throw something else out there?
Yeah.
I want to look at something that I think is a very important part of this, because I think the fall also has to do with, this is the first opportunity that man sees woman as a tool and not as balance. Helpmate comes from two words. Ezer, E-Z-E-R, and Kenegdo, as K-E-N-E-G-D-O. The first one, E-Z-E-R, it means to rescue, to save, and to be strong. To be a savior for, to bring deliverance, or to show strength. The other word means to stand in front of, to oppose, as to a bird having two wings. It means to show the image of a man, but opposite him, to stand face to face. So, this thing talks about protecting and standing against. The standing against is not, I'm wanting to fight you at everything that we do. It is I am your protector, or to help you protect you from those things that are dangerous or adverse to, as Pastor said, those things that are excuse me, I wrote it down here. Adverse to the principles of the kingdom. So she is to be with him to bring balance in that area. And as I mentioned before, looking at, for lack of a better word, the patriarch Abraham and his the genealogy of his family, or even looking at Hagar's side of it, you see the balance of it is when they have the offspring. It shows you that they stood together, show that there was intimacy. So when you look at this, you see she takes the lead, and it even says she ate and she gave it to her husband. Not the husband gave it to her, or not that they ate together, but she takes the full lead on this. And when you also look at, what follows after that, his complaint is, this is the woman that you gave me that caused this. So he uses his spiritual side for selfish reasons, and it doesn't work the way he thinks it's going to work. It doesn't come out, and I'm not probably giving this justice, but I hope y'all see what I'm saying. There is no balance here. There is no seeking of life. There is no doing this to bring balance in the earth, or to cultivate the garden, cultivate the thoughts of man. All of this has to do with what is right for me, and that I thought was worth kind of bringing up, because that's all a part of what is I think anyway supports what's been explained.
It does, Ron, because when he says, this is the woman you gave me, right? What he's saying is making an excuse. We do it all the time. We make excuses for what we don't want to do. Well, I've been in this church all my life. These are my friends, and they're going to separate from me. Or, yeah, I believe it, but, and whatever follows that but negates everything in front of it. So all he's saying when he said the woman you gave me, all he's showing us is that this physical human is full of excuses. Always want to blame someone else. And the one that's being blamed is the one that is able to give life. And that is reflected in the way that the representation of femininity is treated in this earth, or has been, I should say, has been treated. But now, because of the efforts of a few, the tables have turned for the many. It is time for the few to sit down and talk about what we need to deal with in order for us to get beyond simply recognizing that the table has turned for the many. We have talked about that. We need to look at the flaws that we have. We need to look at the uncertainty that we have. We need to look at the covered up doubt that exists in us. All of these things need to be put on the table. Example. We talked to those people yesterday, and the reason we were talking is because we made an agreement. We were going to ask the hard questions. We were going to give the true answers. And until we do that with ourselves, the earth will continue to die. We got to stop making excuses. You know, what we'll do, we'll start running the race. And we talk about running a relay. This is not a relay. If you run the race, you're running for everybody. You don't stop. You just pick up as you go. We can't afford to stop. We can't sit back and say, okay, we see the things against women is changing now. Okay, we see that racism is being bubbled to the top now. Okay, so what are we going to do with it? What are we going to do about that? We see that religion is falling apart. Yes, it is. But what are we going to give to replace that? What are we going to put in its place when the foundation is gone? We cannot continue down this road. And when I say we, I'm not talking about the 12 teachers or just the people on this phone. I'm talking about everyone. Everyone who is influenced by the truth has upon their shoulders the existence or the non-existence of the earth. And if you think that I am being hyperbolic about that, then remember that we are not the first type of man, the first type of physical being to occupy this earth. If we believe that this is too far-fetched, ask the ones who occupied this earth prior to us, how far-fetched is this? Any questions or comments about that? And Ron, does that fit what you just said?
Yes, sir, definitely. And let me say for the record, and I appreciate all the questions and all your comments, Pastor, for straightening everything out here. This is totally opposite of the way I saw it. I saw the spiritual side of man's taking the forefront, but the results is the opposite of what Abraham and his family did. That was for the betterment of mankind. This was for total selfishness. And that is the danger of religion. That is the danger of all. As Adam saw, he only saw part of the picture. He did this without understanding who he was. Because if he had understanding of who he was, this does not take place.
Let me ask about clarity then, since I do believe you're contemplating. I do believe you are processing. I do believe that. Are there any questions, or do you need clarity? Hello?
Charles, with the answer.
Yeah, answer a little bit, but when you said that when God put Adam to sleep and he never woke up, and he pulled a rib out, and he said, and he formed the woman. You see, all that was doing in the time of his sleep. So what you're saying, we are all still asleep.
Yes, we are still asleep. And the only time we wake up is when we start living from our soul.
So that would be spiritually blind.
Even worse, we dead.
Okay.
See, we think that we are spiritually alive because we go to church. because we understand some scriptures. If you are spiritually alive, then you're a life giver. You create what benefits humanity. Abracadabra is a Hebrew word that means I create with words. We create with words for the benefit of humanity. Think about that.
And for the record, Pastor, since you mentioned that, when you trace the root all the way down to the root of the name Eve, it does talk about to life, being life, and it talks about to breathe and breath. So this is just supporting what you're saying.
We are life, and we can't get around that. If you can't be life without being life giver. Does that make sense? It's just like water can't be water without being wet. It's one thing that we will never forget. All of us, everybody on earth, know their roots. That's why we're always striving for something, and what we're striving for is to know who we are, but we replace it with things. And when that thing gets to us, it's not enough, and we get more things. Or when that friend hurts our feelings, or when the more we get, the more we want, is not so much the more we get, the more we want, as it is the more we get, the less we see ourselves, the less chance we have of seeing who we are, because what we're getting is blinding us to seeing who we are. We're seeing with our eyes and not our eye. And the element of energy is going to continue to be a distraction. And that's coming directly from the Creator. And these distractions are not coming from an entity called the devil, unless you realize you're the devil. These distractions are from the Creator to sharpen our focus. Iron sharpens iron. Just like some of the issues we deal with in life, we talk about them making us stronger. Distractions sharpens our focus, because when you don't allow distractions to get you out of kilter, that sharpens your focus. Question? I want to ask Barbara if this is I'm sorry, the question that you raised about the female, if it had not happened, did that answer it in terms of my saying that all of this was intended from the beginning?
Oh, it did, because as I was thinking, when, for example, when animals mate, they mate for the primary purpose of procreating a species.
Right.
When humans mate, they mate for procreation, but they primarily mate because they're searching for wholeness. That state that existed prior to separation. So they're not, and that's what the relationship is. It's more than just, because if it was just to procreate, people could go out and have sex with anybody, and that would do it for them. But we seek something deeper in terms of a relationship, the creation of wholeness. And so the symbol of the man and the woman is that of wholeness, not only for them individually, but for mankind in general. It's that seeking for the existence, the oneness that we were originally when the Adam was hermaphrodite in a sense. I don't know if that resonates.
It does with me. I hope it resonates because that's exactly what we're looking for. It becomes selfish. We can make it selfish, I should say. But even in that, we're still searching for the same thing, that wholeness. You're right. You're right. Ron Johnson?
I think this says something else or reminds us of something, that the objective is we think about, being redeemed or whatever, and the things we've heard all of our lives in the church. And the scriptures we see are the meaning of them are so much more than we could have ever imagined. And looking at who the human is, or getting a glimpse of who and what it means to be human, that is a climb. It's a decision to make that turn, but it's not something you just walk into. It's something that takes a lot of effort and a lot of dedication and a lot of denial of self. And that's a lot of what I get out of a lot of the lessons that we've had here lately. And part of the strength to do that is loving mankind and having that desire to see oneness and wholeness in the earth. And that's what, can be the fuel or the energy to open your eyes and lead you in the path that you're seeking. So that's just something I got from. So one of the things I got from this, because I think, the more we look at stuff like this, you see a different side of God as opposed to this fearsome being that we've been told he is. You see something entirely different. Anyway.
Earlier, you all were talking earlier about Adam and the decision he made to either continue on doing the things that Elohim would want, or doing things on his own. And as we've been talking about this, and Pastor, back to that, what you talked about when I asked the question about man and woman, it seems then that the Creator honors us by giving us that opportunity to make decisions. I mean, that's powerful, to decide, to be able to decide what to do, when to do it, how to do it. But more importantly, if we decide to do it, from a spiritual perspective, we would do it in tandem with what the Creator would have us do. And that gets back to what you were saying, Juan, about um, we got to see things from the perspective of what's good for mankind, not what's good for me and me alone, or me, myself, and I. And so it strikes me that this very act of man being asleep and having the opportunity to be awakened once spiritually aware of its source, and then to make decisions after that awareness based on who it is and who it knows it is powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that, Barbara, what you just said is the reason that our Creator placed the flaming sword to the entrance of the understanding of what life is, the tree of life. Because it is so powerful. Immature understanding and selfishness, having that kind of power, would definitely destroy humanity. Can you see how dangerous that is?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Hey, Rip, I don't want to keep going back to this.
You have to if you
No, say what, Rip?
You have to if you don't understand, Charles. It's okay.
When he took the rib from the man and brought and made the woman and brought the woman to the man, and the man said what he said, and then you were saying that he was asleep, he never woke up. So all this been going on in his dream world.
We're living in a dream world, yeah. Yeah. This stuff, anything that is spiritual does not decay. Anything you make with your physical hands decay, but it does not. It does not disappear. That tree can rot, but it's still in the earth, because the earth is spiritual, because it was brought into existence by spirituality for a spiritual purpose. And the idea of this rib is not a rib. What happened is this entity was shown that it was masculine and feminine. That's the embellishment of the story, taking the rib, those kinds of things are there to get our attention. That's our burning bush. You have to see what's really there. Being aware of the masculine and feminine, no different than what we are. We think right now, and I'm talking about humanity, mankind, that this is all it is, a woman and a man, without understanding that what was being said there in that passage is that you are a creator. You have the capacity to create because you have the seed of creation. And when we see that, what do we do with it? The reflection of what we do with it is shown in how we treat the representative of femininity. Do we respect it? We used to follow it. So it's more than just woman being created from a rib. That's not it at all. It's far, far beyond that. And that's the story that's being told. And that is the reason men mistreat women, because they're taught to. She was made from you. She's submissive to you. She's to obey you. You're the man of the house. All that foolishness. That's where it comes from. Misunderstanding what's being said in that scripture. And it builds from there all the way through the scriptures. And guess what? Every bit of what the scriptures talk about is in us. The good, the bad, the ugly, the indifferent, every bit of it. Light, darkness, evil, good, all of it. All of it. That's why the mind has to be renewed. The mind is a fragile thing, a dangerous thing, uncontrolled by the soul. It does awful things. The soul is the guardrail for our existence in this earth.
Hey, Reb.
Yes, sir.
What in that 25th verse? What do naked mean? What they were not ashamed of?
Ron, will you deal with that? Because I think you said something about that earlier. If you're talking,
Because I know they ain't talking about no clothes on and it was just naked. I know it's go further than that.
But Charles is not talking about a physical nakedness at all.
Okay.
There's no physicality there at all. This is the problem. We have been indoctrinated with the scriptures to believe that everything in there is physical. It's only physical when it's convenient. Any preacher, any teacher would tell you that this was a spiritual being. Yet, when it comes to physicality, they want that man and that woman to be physical beings. They are not. So when it talks about naked, it's not talking about your clothes being removed from you, because at this point there are no clothes. When it talks about their nakedness being covered with a fig leaf, that's an allegory. That's emphasizing how the Creator continues to be our covering, even with our deception. Even though we are right now, religion is a body of deception, and yet the Creator covers. What does that mean? The life was not taken from anyone because of their because of their deception. You're given an opportunity to redeem yourself, and in redeeming yourself, you're redeeming humanity. Does that make sense? Ron, Barbara, whoever, Kathy, whoever's on this line, somebody. If you see it clearly, if you can help me do it, please. With the next.
Well, I was just going to add, when you look up those words, being shrewd or crafty or clever, which describes naked and crafty in verse 1 of chapter 3, it's what you feel. It's the place your mind goes when you become totally selfish, when you see how to take advantage of something, or you see how to take advantage of someone, or to make money, or to do some selfish deed or selfish act. So that's what I'm saying is his thinking shifts here. he sees something else. He's no longer concerned with being the cultivator of the garden. He's no longer concerned with guarding his thoughts. As Pastor as said to, he's not thinking or moving anymore from his soul. He's back to his mind, and he's being clever. So in that regard, it's something we can all relate to.
The other
Does that help
thing
in
related.
all? I'm sorry, Barbara. Go ahead.
Another aspect of the nakedness, it says they weren't ashamed. I mean, so they could have sexual relations and not be ashamed of it. In other words, there were not those feelings of things that have blown up into negative concepts. There's no feelings of lust or shame or misusing each other, or I mean, it was a I don't know the spiritual word for natural. it was nothing was. They didn't need to hide any attributes of lust or shame or doubt, that kind of stuff with each other. They were what he saw and what it saw and what Ish saw and what Isha saw were the genuineness of those two entities. So it didn't have all those other negative connotations that we have about it nowadays. I don't know how better to describe it, but the nakedness relates to nothing hidden, in a sense. No hidden nothing hidden. That's all I'm going to say.
You see how difficult it is? Why? Because it's spiritual. You say car, you say, yeah, 4 wheels. You can describe it. But spiritual things are difficult to explain. I hope that's helping you, Charles.
Yes, it's having a whole lot.
Okay. And I don't want you to be uncomfortable about going back, because if you don't understand it, then we need to talk about it, or we need to find some clearer answers for you, And that goes.
Thank you.
That goes for anybody on this line. Are there any other questions, Ron? Ron, if you're talking, you're muted.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I was talking. I'm pretty much done. I just think that's all I had. Looking at my notes, I just kind of felt bad about yesterday, and I took pictures of these verses and I took it to work with me, and kind of looked at it today, and let it just kind of come to me, and jot down some notes, and figure we talk about it again. And I'm sure there's a lot more we can talk about another time, but for now, that's pretty much all I have.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
I hope. And again, if this was a lot said, I hope everybody got it. If not, write down the questions or concerns, and as usual, they'll be addressed first thing Saturday. Okay. Thank you.
That's good teaching, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Before you guys hang up, I'm recording right now from Mel. Before you guys hang up, I want to remind you.
Pastor, hold on one moment. She's going to stop the recording. You want her to stop the recording, right?
Ma'am.
Did you say you wanted her to stop the recording, Vermel?
Yes, ma'am.